the first roundtable on writing constitutions and the Bill of Rights. I'll just like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Sitosami Malunga. I am a Zimbabwean. I work in South Africa in the United Nations Development Program Regional Office, and I look after our work on governance in Africa. I am very privileged to have with me a very distinguished panel of speakers, some of whom you have interacted with in the past couple of days. Just by way of introduction, I will start off on my extreme left, introducing Justice Albie Sachs from South Africa. Justice Sachs has an amazing history. Some of you who attended the session in the morning on justice and human rights might have had an opportunity to meet with him in that session. He is previously a justice of the Constitutional Court in South Africa. He worked for many years in exile for the ANC. He studied and taught law in England and in Mozambique. And he worked closely with the late ANC President Oliver Tambo in exile. And perhaps some of the most interesting things Justice Sachs brings to this forum is his engagement and his involvement in the writing of the Constitution in South Africa, but more importantly, his role in the implementation of the Constitution in South Africa after the end of apartheid. Welcome, Justice. We are very honored to have you with us. Even as young students, we continue to, in our eyes, continue to lighten up as we read your judgments. Even now, I do read your judgments even for leisure. Thank you so much. On my immediate left, if you were here yesterday as well, you may have met her. She was in the session, in the parallel session on voice and participation. We have Reem Hassan, who works with the National Council for Human Rights in Jordan. She has led the human rights work in Jordan for a long time, and yesterday some of us who attended the session had the opportunity of just getting a glimpse of some of the more fascinating things they're actually doing there in terms of the promotion and protection of human rights in Jordan. The efforts to keep the council independent, the efforts to challenge issues related to human rights violations in Jordan in a rapidly changing environment. I think that I was actually quite humbled to hear some of the experiences. Madam, welcome. On my right, I will just double check because the distinguished speaker came in after we had started. I do not want to.
I was there before you came in.
Oh, yes, I stand corrected, just as well. I think it was a very quick rebuke and well taken. Thank you, madam. Dr. Makram Ebeid. She's Egyptian, and she's a former member of parliament in Egypt and a professor of political science at the American University in Cairo. Welcome, madam. We are pleased, and I guess now, having been rebuked, I'm going to be very cautious. Let me take this opportunity now to welcome all the participants. We will have an opportunity to have you introduce introduce yourselves. And the format of this discussion is going to be as follows. In the past day, we've been having presentations from speakers and then questions written down and fielded. This time around, we're going to switch it. This is the opportunity for the speakers and for the participants to interact more closely with the speakers up here. So we will open the discussion to the participants, and the speakers will have the opportunity to respond to the various issues that have been raised by the participants. Just to recall once again, the discussion here centers around writing constitutions and the Bill of Rights. My request is that as you make a comment or you field a question, you first introduce yourself. You briefly tell us who you are. It doesn't have to be long. That's the first rule. The second rule is that you limit your contribution to a maximum of 2 minutes. The intention is to ensure that everybody else has as wide an opportunity to contribute as possible. We will, at this particular point in time, directly go to the audience and request that whoever has any specific comment, question, please feel free. Do we have somebody who's going to go around with the mic? Okay, they're actually getting somebody to do that for us now. While we're doing that, maybe if I can just have, by way of just raising your hand so I can have an indication. I will give up my mic for now so that we don't really waste any more time, and we can start. I may actually walk around. I hope the panel doesn't mind if I do that.
Like opera?
Yes, like opera. I understand she's retired, so who knows? I might be the next opera.
Somali, I'm a child right consultant in that country. I have the first point about South Africa. I want to know more about the public participation in the drafting of constitutions in two perspectives. The first, the content. Are they discussing the basic principles, or they're discussing the actual draft, or discussing both in different stages? The second point, what is or the mechanism that to organize these discussions, especially, I know that for sure that you are included children who's under 18, they don't have the voting right, but they was included in the drafting process. So how to inform us of different processes or different mechanisms to include all the groups in actual drafting. The second, for the three presenter, is the second one for the three presenter was how it changed the society culture in a very short time to guarantee, no, it's for the three presenters, that how to change the society culture in a very short time that we have both in Tunisia or in Egypt or whatever in Arab countries, to have to take informed decision, right informed based, and also to be informed about what is the principle and the values of the human rights.
Maybe just introduce yourself. I don't. Did you introduce yourself? Okay, thank you.
Somali, I'm a child rights expert in the countries.
Thank you.
My name is Sudarshan. I work as a policy advisor for the UNDP in its regional center in Bangkok. I'd like to get the reflections of the panel on a hypothesis about constitution making that I want to state. And that is that, very often constitutions are drafted by elected assemblies. So they combine the duties of elected parliament and the constitution. Now it seems to me that the constitution is best drafted by a group that, or a group that has people who will not be exercising power. Because the people, if the constitution is drafted by people who anticipate that they will be the ones exercising power, they will then give themselves a fair amount of power under the constitution. And the whole principle of a constitution is to put limitations on the exercise of power. So it seems to me that it makes sense to have at least an agreement on some principles in a body, as did South Africa, where there are people who have no chance at all of ever being in power and being in governance, but who have a say in what the constitution says. And I want to back this up with a hypothesis or an evidence for my hypothesis, which is that although the Indian constitution was drafted by a body that functioned both as a parliament and as a constituent assembly, it had a very large contingent of nominated members, because the princely states of India were not part of British India, and they had to be represented in the Constituent Assembly. So the Maharajas or the princes of Kashmir and Mysore and Baroda nominated very high caliber people to the Constituent Assembly, who played a very important role. Also, and therefore you got all kinds of safeguards for minorities, such as the Sikhs can carry kirpans and issues that are now a source of contention in countries like France or Canada, where you can wear the veil, carry a kirpan. All of these were resolved because of the composition of the Constituent Assembly. So I would ask whether the panel would agree that the constitution making process should involve a large number of people who will never ever exercise power in their respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudarshan. As this is a fast evolving situation and transition, we keep bending the rules and tightening them. We want to limit your questions at a very maximum, please, to 2. The preference is for 1. If it continues, we might actually tighten it further, so that as many people can participate. Thank you. There was a hand here.
Thank you. Judge Sachs. I was honored, delighted to have read all your books when I was in prison, related to your experiences. I couldn't believe that I would see you in person, but now you are here, and I would like to, first of all, pay tribute to everything you have done as a freedom fighter, as a judge, as a man of constitutional rights. Now, my question to you is now 10 years or more after the liberation of South Africa, and having been, through the whole process, how do you see the Constitution of South Africa and the evolution of South Africa generally unfolding? Every time I see a South African or an Indian, I say, why haven't these 2 candidates done what they should have done as being mentors and promoters of democracy in the States? And again, I'm asking you, isn't there a role for independent democratic South Africa to lead a pan-African democratic movement, if not throughout the South? Thank you.
I'm Mohamed, professor of sociology and human social policy analyst. My question is directed to Dr. Mohamed, and it has to do from this point, do you think that this is a viable option for the initiation of writing an Egyptian constitution for the moment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just so that we give an opportunity to our panel before they get inundated with comments and questions, I'd like to pass the floor to the panel. I'll just start off with Justice Sachs and then we'll go that way.
Fairly early on in our negotiations, we do a distinction between secret negotiations and confidential negotiations. We were against secret negotiations. Nobody knows they're even happening. But we spoke to our members and we said, you've got to understand the need for confidential negotiations. When things were very delicate and important issues had to be decided in a very informal way to see if there was a way forward in certain respects. And our members understood that. They understood there are times when you don't have public discussions. You're sounding out. You're trying to find out how far can you go with the other side, and they want to know how far can they go with you. And I think informal, confidential discussions can be very important, provided they don't replace public, transparent discussions and debate, particularly when decisions that are going to be binding are made ultimately. I would say in the early part of the negotiations, those of you who heard me speak earlier, we had a two-stage constitution-making process. The first stage was when people, self-appointed people, sat round a table to find out how can we get a new constitution. I think we had something like 25 different political and governmental organizations. And of that number, Makram yesterday, he knew the total, something like 17 were either the South African government or entities created by the South African government. The ANC, the Natal Indian Congress, Transvaal Indian Congress, a few other constituted 7. We had one called the Minority Front. It had hardly any members, Mr. Rajbansi, and when it came to different committees, he would run from one room to the other to represent his own organization. But he had the same voting power as the ANC, the same voting power as the government. Then we had to decide how can decisions be made in a group like that. And we were considering 50 plus 1, 75% consensus. None of them worked. And one of our negotiators, Cyril Ramaphosa, came up with the idea of sufficient consensus. Sufficient consensus for the process to move forward. That really meant the two principal negotiators, the government, that had the guns, the administration, the power, on the one hand. If they were against something, doesn't matter if everybody else agreed, we wouldn't get a constitution. The ANC had huge popular support. If it was against, you wouldn't get a constitution. And we appointed 2 judges from the judiciary. One, the first time we had black judges, Mohamed, had the confidence of the ANC grouping, and Judge Ebeid had the confidence of them. But both distinguished good judges, objective and fair, but understanding the different communities very well. And only once did they have to decide, when there was a vote, that there was sufficient consensus, because the South African government and the ANC were agreed, and various others supported. The objections couldn't stymie the whole process. In those days, we didn't have much public participation. We were still working on the ground rules, if you like, the foundation, even the process. Then there would be official statements made that said almost nothing. Official statements leave out all the interesting bits and just say progress, reported progress, free and frank discussions and so on. But the parties would leak to their sides, and each side would claim huge victories. So it was amazing, both sides would win. And the government more or less controlled the press. The ANC didn't have any press. So our supporters were getting very upset because they just heard the government succeeding, ANC capitulating, ANC making concessions. And that can do actually a lot of damage to the negotiation process. We reported back, and I think this is absolutely vital, the participants in negotiations must report back to their constituents. And we reported back to the National Executive, I would say once a month, once every 2 weeks, National Executive of the ANC, and to the, we had regional meetings, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, explaining. Don't follow what you read in the newspapers because people put a spin. This was the issue, this was our proposal, that was their counter proposal. We came up with a third way. That's why, now we understand. And that public education all the way through, even on the processes you're taking, absolutely vital. Constitution making becomes the most wonderful public education program you could ever imagine. Because the issues are hot, they're real, and everybody's interested. How will this affect us? And it gives you a chance to explain things, not high theory. What does it mean for you? Should we have a prime minister, very powerful in the English sense, or president in the American sense? Which do we want? We chose for a prime ministerial president, as it happened. We didn't want a single figure directly elected who could clash with Parliament. But we had to explain to people why we chose that, and that went into the Constitution. So you're debating real kinds of questions. When it came to, so then we agreed to 24 principles, sitting around the table, basic principles that had to be included in the new Constitution. And these principles were important for political minorities and other minorities to feel we won't be completely submerged when we have Parliament and majority rule. And that's part of the answer to the question about the smaller groups that are in a minority will never have a big position under majoritarian rule, but they are part of the nation and they don't want to submerge themselves and be obliterated. Even if they can still vote and get medicine and go to school, they want the identity retained. So all of these features were included in the basic principles, and there wasn't much public participation then, except through the media and press releases that were given, televising some of the debates and discussions. The media played a very, very important role to get transparency, and then reporting back by the participants. Then we had general elections, and of course the parties went to the communities, explaining their different projects for the Constitution. But that's direct party political engagement. And then the next phase came after Parliament was elected, the actual writing of the text of the Constitution. In our case, it was so important for the people who never had the vote, because they were black, to feel that they were being directly represented by people they had chosen. And that meant they would accept the Constitution because there were no intermediaries between the delegates who they elected and themselves. At the same time, Parliament established a number of technical committees. And the technical committees brought in people from outside. We had a lot of university professors, political scientists. They were particularly important then. And they were important, some were in political parties, others weren't. Some were aligned to, but they weren't. And they played the role that you mentioned, the nominees of the Maharajas and so on played. Very, very important. And sometimes there were very critical political issues where we couldn't get agreement on wording between the old National Party representing the white government and the ANC. And we'd say, well, okay, we'll send it to the experts. And sometimes the ANC lawyers would get together, the lawyers from the other side, they would find a formulation and say, you know, we can get it by our principles. Principals, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L-S, our principals, that's the people we're representing. And we found it convenient. Now the side had to give way to the other side in terms of terminology. So what you want are experts with a broad vision candidates are not running for office. They want to feel a pride in what's emerging, and they have international comparative experience to draw on. So I think that was something that was important in terms of the process. Also, at that stage, Parliament itself went out. It had various steering committees, and they went out to the public. They had public meetings. We used television a lot. We had one wonderful program, it's called Future Imperfect, where we had a judge, Dennis Davis, would get people to sit at a table from each of the parties. But if you, on television, you make a party political speech, you lose. Because people don't want to hear a speech on television. So the people would take off their ties, you want to look very popular and friendly and nice, you crack a joke. And even the dialogue on television became a much more humane dialogue. Because you know that you score with the viewers if you look like you're an intelligent, warm, friendly human being. So the debate had to be conducted in that way. And very hot issues like capital punishment, rights for gay men and lesbian women, whether we should have independent states, how much federalism to have, Prime Minister, all of these things were debated on television. It requires a very good host to manage that. But I can imagine in our media-friendly world that's a way of softening the bitterness of political debate. And something like 2 million people wrote into Parliament. In fact, so many people wrote in, they had to have a method of conveying what they'd written in. Because if every member of Parliament read 2 million pieces, they'd have no time to do any voting, any decision making. And in that way, the ultimate constitution was really felt to be something that the nation was conversant with. There were all sorts of other programs as well. They even had political scientists measuring knowledge about the constitution before and after these educational programs. So political scientists and others, there's a big future for you, both in public education and in measuring the extent to which people understand what the issues are. I don't know if those were the questions for me.
Yes, thank you very much, Judge. There were questions fielded to the rest of the panel as well. But just before the panel takes a chance to respond to those questions, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our fourth distinguished panelist, Ayub El Ayasi from Morocco.